I never imagined that the most terrifying moment of my life wouldn't be caused by illness, pain, or the machines keeping me alive, but by my own sister. Lying in that hospital bed, unable to speak, unable to move, I could hear everything. The rhythmic sound of the ventilator was the only proof that I was still here, still fighting. Doctors had clearly said there was hope. My condition was serious, yes, but not hopeless. Recovery was possible, time was needed. Patience was needed. Humanity was needed. But my sister didn't hear hope. She heard inconvenience. She heard delay. She heard an obstacle standing between her and whatever she wanted next. While I lay there, trapped inside my own body, she signed the papers. Papers that would silence the machine. Papers that would end my life, not because it was over, but because it was easier. In that moment, I learned a brutal truth. Cruelty doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes with a familiar face and a shared childhood. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. I wanted to remind her of who we once were. But all I could do was listen as my life was discussed like a burden. A bill, a problem to be solved. My existence reduced to signatures and checkboxes. Then something unexpected happened. A doctor walked in, not rushed, not careless, but attentive. He didn't just look at charts. He looked at me. He noticed the subtle signs others had ignored. A change in my breathing, a response in my eyes, a reaction that said, "This person is still here." And instead of following orders blindly, he asked questions. He revealed what my sister didn't expect. He explained that my brain activity showed awareness. That my condition was cooling slowly but surely. That removing the ventilator at this stage would not be mercy, it would be negligence. He revealed that consent under false assumptions could be challenged. And most importantly, he revealed that ethics still matter, even when someone is silent. In that room, the power shifted. The papers lost their authority. The truth took over. My sister's confidence collapsed. The calm mask she wore cracked when she realized the decision she tried to make in the shadows was now standing in the light. The doctor didn't just save my life. He restored my dignity. He reminded everyone present that a human life is not disposable just because it's quiet. That day taught me something I will never forget. Survival is not just about breathing. It's about being seen, being valued, being protected when you cannot protect yourself. And sometimes, the real miracle isn't waking up. It's discovering that even in betrayal, truth can still win. If you ever doubt the power of one ethical voice, remember the doctor's courage was louder than a signed death sentence. And because of that, I'm here today, alive, breathing, and telling this story. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from family, because family is supposed to be the last safe place. When the world turns cold, when life becomes fragile, we instinctively believe that blood will protect blood. I believed that too. I believed that no matter how helpless I became, my own sister would stand between me and harm. But lying there, trapped inside a body that refused to respond, I learned how dangerous that belief can be. There is a unique pain in realizing that someone who knows your childhood, your fears, your laughter, and your scars can still choose to abandon you. Strangers may hurt you out of ignorance, but family hurts you with full awareness. They know exactly where to strike. In that hospital room, I wasn't just fighting an illness. I was facing the terrifying truth that love is not guaranteed by relation. The silence of my body was heavy, but the silence of my sister's compassion was heavier. Betrayal from family doesn't arrive suddenly. It grows quietly. It hides behind forced concern, polite smiles, and hollow words. It convinces you that everything is fine, right up until the moment when a decision is made without you, against you. I could hear voices discussing my life as if I were already gone, as if I were a memory instead of a person still breathing. That realization changes something inside you forever. You stop seeing family as an unbreakable bond and start seeing it as a choice, one that some people refuse to make. What made it worse was the helplessness. When betrayal comes from outside, you can run, you can resist, you can defend yourself. But when it comes while you are powerless, when you cannot speak or move or explain your will, it becomes a different kind of cruelty. It strips you not only of trust, but of dignity. you begin to understand how vulnerable life truly is, and how easily it can be decided by someone else's selfishness. Family betrayal also forces a painful self-questioning. You replay memories, searching for signs you ignored. You wonder when love turned into resentment, when care turned into calculation. You ask yourself whether you mattered less because you were weak, because you were inconvenient, because you could no longer give anything in return. These questions don't have easy answers, but they leave permanent marks. Yet there is a harsh clarity that comes with this kind of betrayal. It teaches you that shared blood does not always mean shared values. It shows you that loyalty is revealed in crisis, not comfort. And it exposes the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the people closest to you are capable of the greatest harm, precisely because they are close enough to decide your fate. In that moment of betrayal, something inside me broke, but something else awakened. An understanding that survival is not just about bodies and machines, but about recognizing who truly sees your humanity. And once that understanding takes root, you never see family, trust, or love in the same way again. Power has a way of changing people, especially when it appears quietly and without resistance. When someone realizes they can decide for another human being, that they can sign a paper and control the outcome of a life, something dangerous awakens inside them. In that hospital room, power didn't look loud or violent. It looked calm, efficient, and justified. It wore the mask of responsibility while hiding a complete absence of compassion. Money often fuels that hunger for control. It turns patience into impatience and empathy into calculation. Medical bills, inheritance, inconvenience. These ideas begin to outweigh the value of a living person. When compassion requires waiting, caring, and sacrifice, power whispers an easier option. End the problem. Not end the pain, not end the suffering, but end the person who represents it. That is where humanity begins to disappear. Control becomes most terrifying when the other person cannot speak. Silence is mistaken for consent. Stillness is treated as surrender. In that state, power feels absolute. Decisions are made quickly because there is no argument, no resistance, no voice to interrupt the narrative being created. The person in the bed is reduced to a condition, a cost, a delay. Once that happens, cruelty no longer feels cruel to the one in control, it feels practical. What makes this even darker is how easily such decisions are justified. Words like best interest, quality of life, and inevitable outcome are used to soften actions that would otherwise feel unbearable. These phrases create emotional distance. They allow someone to feel responsible rather than ruthless. They allow control to feel like care, even when it is nothing of the sort. When power and money combine, compassion is often the first casualty. The question shifts from, what does this person need? To, what do I want to be free from? That shift is subtle but deadly. It turns a human life into an obstacle. And once someone is seen as an obstacle, removing them feels logical, even necessary. The most chilling part is that this kind of cruelty does not always come from hatred. Sometimes it comes from indifference, from emotional exhaustion, from a desire to move on. That is what makes it so dangerous. A person doesn't have to be evil to do something devastating. They just have to stop caring enough. In that room, the true threat was not the illness or the machines. It was the belief that control over another life could be exercised without accountability, without empathy, and without pause. When power is unchecked and compassion is silenced, cruelty doesn't announce itself. It signs papers quietly and calls it a decision. Truth rarely arrives gently. Most of the time, it waits until the room is at its darkest, until the outcome feels sealed, until everyone believes there is nothing left to question. In moments like that, lies feel comfortable and assumptions feel final. That is when truth chooses to surface, not to comfort but to confront. Not to whisper, but to interrupt. In that hospital room, truth did not come from emotion or desperation. It came from observation. From someone who looked closer when others had already decided. While papers were signed and intentions hidden behind authority, the truth remained quietly present, waiting to be noticed. A slight movement. A response that didn't fit the story being told. Evidence that refused to align with the narrative of inevitability. What makes truth powerful is that it does not need permission. It does not care about hierarchy, relationships, or confidence. It only needs one moment of attention to dismantle everything built on false certainty. When the truth emerged, it exposed how fragile the decisions around my life really were. They were not based on facts but on convenience. Not on medical reality but on personal urgency. Dark moments create pressure to simplify. People want quick answers, clean endings, and decisions that remove uncertainty. Truth disrupts that desire. It complicates things. It forces accountability. It demands that people slow down and face what they would rather avoid. That is why truth is often resisted until the last possible second. When it finally surfaces, it does more than change outcomes. It changes power. The authority that once felt unchallengeable suddenly weakens. Confidence collapses. Voices that were loud grow quiet. The truth does not argue, it stands. And in standing, it exposes motives that were never meant to be seen. There is something almost unsettling about how calm truth can be in chaos. While emotions rise and fear spreads, truth remains steady. It does not rush. It does not exaggerate. It simply exists, undeniable and inconvenient. That steadiness is what makes it impossible to ignore once it is seen. In the darkest moments, when hope feels like a risk and silence feels permanent, truth becomes an act of resistance. It reminds everyone that endings are not always what they seem, and that certainty built on assumption is easily shattered. When truth finally enters the room, it does not just save lives, it reveals who is willing to give up on them, and who refused to stop looking. One ethical decision can outweigh 100 careless ones, especially when a life hangs in the balance. In systems filled with protocols, paperwork, and authority, it is easy for responsibility to become diluted. People follow instructions, sign forms, and move forward without stopping to question whether the process itself is just. But ethics begins where routine ends. It begins the moment someone pauses and asks whether doing something is the same as doing what is right. That pause can feel risky. Choosing ethics over convenience often means challenging expectations, delaying outcomes, or standing alone. It requires courage to step out of the flow and acknowledge that rules exist to serve humanity, not replace it. In medical spaces, where decisions carry irreversible weight, ethics is not an abstract idea. It is the difference between protection and harm. An ethical choice is rarely dramatic. It does not demand applause or recognition. Most of the time, it looks like attention, patience, and responsibility. It looks like refusing to person to a diagnosis or a prognosis. It means recognizing that silence does not equal consent and that vulnerability demands greater care, not faster conclusions. What makes one ethical decision so powerful is its ripple effect. It slows down the machinery of harm. It forces transparency. It invites accountability into spaces where it is often avoided. One person choosing to act with integrity can interrupt a chain of actions that would otherwise continue unquestioned. That interruption can change not only outcomes, but perspectives. Ethics also restores dignity. When someone is unable to speak for themselves, ethical action becomes their voice. It protects them from being treated as an object or a burden. It reaffirms that every life, regardless of its condition, carries inherent value. That recognition alone can shift the entire direction of a situation. In moments of crisis, ethics reminds us that the goal is not efficiency but humanity. The fastest decision is not always the right one. The easiest path is not always the most humane. Ethical choices demand that we tolerate uncertainty and discomfort in order to avoid irreversible injustice. When a single person chooses to honor that responsibility, they do more than follow a moral code. They become a barrier between vulnerability and exploitation. They prove that systems do not define outcomes, people do. And in the presence of true ethics, even the most fragile life is given the chance it deserves.